it seems like there's these two entities of the mother, right? The goddess mother. But then Mary Magdalene, she's not the mother.
She was the rebel. She's the archetype that appeals to women of our times, because she is the rebel. She was the wife, not the mother.
Yeah.
She was the wife of Jesus. But the archetype is actually Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary are part of a bigger archetype.
Okay.
That include all the other archetypes like Kali and I have a whole list of them that I've put together over the years, and now my mind is not bringing
So this kind of it's funny they're both Mary. So you have Mary Magdalene and the Virgin Mary, and they have this kind of. So are they opposites?
No, not at all, because we're all one.
Right,
including, including the archetype of mother. So we encompass all of those things within each of us.
Yeah. And so you're saying with the rise of feminism, do you think we went too far with the kind of the mother icon? What do you think?
I don't really ever think of it in terms of feminism.
Okay.
I think of it in terms of just the awakening of a whole consciousness of the part of all of us, which is the divine feminine, including men. And it's the side of our that's represented by a heart. It's our heart side. It's our feeling side. So there's an archetype within all male and female that encompasses the divine feminine, and it really, when I first started discovering it, I didn't understand, but then I began to meet the men with heart who totally embraced the movement of the divine feminine.
Right.
It became very exciting.
Right. Okay, so tell me about your journeys. How did this all start?
It started through following synchronicities that led me.
Yeah, we'll just pause when the boats come by.
I was a student of Carl Jung, and when I was in my 30s, I read about synchronicity, and then I began to have the experience in my life, which is coincidences that are more than coincidence. My first synchronicity was a symbol of the lily that came through in 3 different profound ways, and then I began to treat the symbols as if they were a dream. As if it were a waking dream, and I'm looking to understand the meaning of this waking dream that's bringing me the synchronicity.
Right.
So I was able to. That was the first chapter in my Magdalene book. It's called The Lily. It was that was my experience. At the end of that experience, when I came to a full understanding of what the lily was about, I began to have the experience with the master numbers. I began waking every night at 4:44 and driving up to a place where I was applying for a job, and my odometer would turn over to 4:44, and I began asking everybody, "Do you see 4:44?" And they'd say no. Yeah. So for 5 years, I was asking people, but after 5 years, I found a whole group of people, including another therapist named Julia Ingram, who had written a book with a man named Nick Brunick called The Messengers, and it was about a whole group of people that had been seeing this and calling it the angels.
Right.
By that time, I too was calling it the angels. And when I saw 444, it meant the angels are surrounding you with love and protection. Never fear, because the angels' help is nearby. And that word angels, it's like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's just a term that represents something that is of guidance that from beyond the body.
Right.
So you could call it anything. You could
you
could say Jesus, or you can say Solomon, or you can say Archangel Michael, or Mary Magdalene. Basically, that's all a part of the energy that's available to us all.
In the astral, would you call it the astral plane, or what do you call that? Because I definitely feel it. Right? I mean, it's it's there. They're all around. What is that? Where is that?
I think of astral plane when you say astral plane is something that has been defined by men to explain what's happening just on the other side of the veil of life.
Okay.
That was kind of close by. But it's really, it's so vast
Yeah.
that we can't even
Yeah.
define it or understand it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like trying to envision an eternal universe
Right.
and time that doesn't exist. So it's so big, I've given up trying to define it.
Right.
But it is beyond this body.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and there's so much that we will never know while we're living in a body, and we don't even know if we're going to know more when we're not living in a body.
Right.
But we know that certain things are powerful and work in this body. For example, you were talking about Shakti Guan,
Yeah.
you know, and creative visualization, which was, it really taught me to use visualization to create what I wanted in my life.
Right, right, right.
And you know, we all start out with wanting physical, material things, but
Yeah.
then you figure out that there's something more than that, and you start reaching beyond that, and then you're gifted by a spiritual journey, which is what happened through my synchronicities. When I began to follow the synchronicities of the 444, it took me to a doctor who I've recently reconnected with, who had a past life memory of being Mary Magdalene.
Oh,
She
cool.
ended up giving me the book about the messenger's book about 444. So we came together, exchanged a really important, significant lesson for both of us, and then I began to meet other women who were having the same experience.
So was the 444 thing, because I know I've seen that it got kind of trendy on Facebook. All of a sudden everybody's taking pictures, but you were doing it way before everybody else. Did that come about spontaneously, or did you read it in a book that those numbers were important?
No, this happened in the early or the mid 80s, and it happened that I woke up one night, I looked at the clock, and it was just flashing 444.
Yeah.
I was coming home from work that day, and I glanced down at my car clock, and I noticed it was 444, and remembered waking up. And then synchronicity, according to Carl Jung,
Yeah.
comes in threes. So that
Right.
same day, I took my daughter as a reward for a good report card to Taco Bell, and the bill was 444.
Okay.
So it was like, okay, got it. Now ask, what does this mean? And the Magdalene Awakening book is about how I followed every synchronicity. You know, first thing I did was go to every book on my shelf with 444 pages, and I just began searching and looking and observing, the way that Native Americans look into the world of spirit. We just saw a fox across the river.
Right.
That means family.
Yeah.
That's the keeper of the family. The
Interesting.
numbers have a specific meaning for
Right,
me now,
right.
and I feel like the angels, the 444, taught me a language that's my subconscious mind understanding of the numbers. It's the way that my intuition opens up. But I followed the 444s, found Mary Magdalene, still didn't think it was really about Mary Magdalene, but through Mary Magdalene I found France and the Cathars, which I began to travel to France and to learned about this group of people that were called heretics and good Christians.
They were both.
They were called heretics by the Catholic Church,
Yeah.
but known in their community as good Christians because they lived a very pure life. They were
Right.
called the pure ones. Well, you can imagine that there was a crusade by the Catholic Church that wiped them out.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a part of history that was almost, honestly, when I started to research them back in the 80s, there would be like one line in an old history book, you know, a group of heretics that
Yeah.
lived in the south of France,
Right.
period.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know so much more, and I began this journey to understand the Cathars, still not fully understanding the connection to Mary Magdalene. And so the synchronicities became following the numbers, the Cathars, Mary Magdalene, and then coming to understand that Mary Magdalene, who I began to have as a personal guide in the same way we could
Yeah.
all have personal guides.
Sure.
And I tested her, you know, I want a proof. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
you know, as I went through my book, I always wanted proof. And I was given so much proof that I had no problem just saying, I know it's you. Now, what's it about? What am I doing?
Yeah.
And really began to understand that it wasn't just me that was having this awakening, that it
Yeah.
really was an awakening of the divine feminine.
Right.
And it was all around me, you know, in the books in the 90s.
Yeah.
And they started talking about, you know, the year 2000 being, you know, maybe the shift of the millenniums, you know, going
Right.
from the age of of the masculine Jesus that he was handing it over to the divine feminine, who they
Right.
say that Mary Magdalene was married to Jesus. I don't know if that's true. Makes sense from what I've researched. And that their family bloodline goes on in France,
Oh, really?
in the Cathars.
Oh, and the Cathars are the ones, these heretics that were the good Christians.
Right.
Okay.
Because after the crucifixion, Mary Magdalene fled because she was in danger. She was being sought by the Romans, and she fled, and she came up onto a beach in France called Sainte Marie de la Mer. And the legend goes from there that she lived there, she taught there, she taught the tenets of the Cathars, because it was long before there were Cathars.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it became the religion of love. It's
Right.
called so she taught the message of Jesus.
Right.
Before there was ever a church called Christianity. I mean, Jesus, there wasn't a before
right,
that.
Right.
And before it was perverted by the Catholic Church. When it became about the masculine. Only priests can be, the connection between us and God, and they have to be celibate, and women are not, worthy.
Right. So, is it true there's a whole book that was lost that was written by Mary Magdalene?
The Book of Love, are you talking about the Book of Love? Well, according to Kathleen McGowan, who I'm a friend with, because we're having parallel experiences with the numbers and Mary Magdalene. And she wrote her books in fiction form, which I considered doing because it was so bizarre. I didn't think anybody'd ever believe it. But I wrote, my book is completely nonfiction. But we met along the way. And they say in her book, she has a book called The Book of Love. And I know, with Kathleen, you can't ever get it all out of her. So, but I've read all of her books. I find them interesting.
Do you? So she wrote fiction.
She wrote fiction,
She wrote it as fiction.
But she says it's all
channeled.
truth.
Is it channeled through Mary Magdalene?
It's her experiences. It's very much like mine. It comes through synchronicities. And she believes that she is one of the Magdalenes. Well, like my Magdalenes, the ones that I found by doing past life regressions. They all feel like they were Mary Magdalene because it's such a powerful experience.
Right, exactly.
But then what I discovered is that there's this archetype of women all over the world that are having the identical experience. In fact, I probably already told you were a Magdalene.
So what does it mean to be a Magdalene?
A strong, spiritual woman who knows they're here on with a purpose. A spiritual purpose, and be driven to live it.
Yes. And so, is it necessary to know Mary Magdalene to be a Magdalene?
No, not at all.
Because you could be a follower of
Kali,
the Shakti energy.
It's all the divine
it's
feminine.
The divine feminine.
And different faces of the divine feminine. Like you and I were talking earlier, you got the face of Mother Mary. Who's the face of all beloved heart. Mary Magdalene was the rebel. She actually funded Jesus' mission, was called a prostitute. The Catholic Church took that back in 1969.
Did they really?
Oh, yes, they absolutely did.
Wow.
But the poor woman was painted nude all across the Renaissance because of that, because of one bishop that decided that she was the prostitute.
Wow, interesting. But did Mary Magdalene, would you say, would be accurate? So, I told you that I've been kind of researching the Dakinis a little bit, and the thing about the Dakinis is they're deep wisdom. They're that true wisdom. But you're saying they're rebels. They're not a gentle force. Now,
it's not a gentle force.
No. And there's almost like kind of a rascal. Yeah, they're rascals, and they're just. So, but also with the Dakinis, and it comes from tantric traditions, is they're sexual. So what is the role of sexuality with Magdalene?
There's a whole group of people who associate Magdalene with tantric sex. Yeah, Tom Kenyon wrote a book. He channeled Mary Magdalene in a book. See, that's the thing. You got different Mary Magdalenes according to the person that's having the Mary Magdalene experience.
Exactly.
So, Tom Kenyon wrote that sex goddess, and that the thing about sex is, it's ecstasy.
Yes.
And that's how I think that the priests were able to justify it with themselves,
Right.
even having sex with each other or with young boys, because they're passing on ecstasy. And that
Right.
ecstasy
Oh,
is what in
interesting.
their mind they saw as God.
Right.
I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah,
That's just
yeah.
a theory, but
Yeah.
I don't understand how they could justify what they do any other way.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so let's talk about ecstasy. Because there's the divine ecstasy, the ecstasy of knowing, of connecting, and that, just the pure divinity. And then there's sexual ecstasy. Are they different? Are they the same?
Well, remember we talked about all things are on the same scale. You have
Yeah.
to think about the chakras.
Yeah.
Your base chakra
Uh-huh.
is sexuality.
Right.
Your crown chakra is your connection to the universe.
Right.
As you rise in your spiritual path, you transmute the energy, the sexual energy, into
Right.
the spiritual energy.
Right.
Creative, sexual, and spiritual energy are the same energy.
Oh, okay. I never thought of the creativity on that line. And so where would creativity be on the chakras?
It's that
the
same.
whole-
It's the whole
it's the
thing.
Kundalini
It's the rising
Yeah.
Kundalini, and
Yeah.
that's you know when you're inspired and you're
Yeah.
writing,
Yeah.
and you're focused,
Yeah, and you can feel it.
and you're energized.
Yeah.
That's
Interesting.
yeah.
And so would you and maybe I'm not understanding it right, but would you place like Mother Mary, Virgin Mary, could you place her on the chakras, or could you place Magdalene, or are they all of them?
I
Their
would
heart?
think. I've been trying to figure this out a long time, looking at all the faces of the divine feminine.
Yeah.
I'm sure Mother Mary would be the heart chakra.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm sure in my writing and philosophizing and journals
Right,
back
right.
there, I probably lined it all up, but I
Right.
can't remember right now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so and then where would Mary Magdalene be? I mean, is she root chakra? Is she? I mean,
I don't know. I feel like she's second and third chakra.
that's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah, it's sexual, but it's connection to the
But it's
world.
the power.
And it's,
Yeah.
power, right.
So, when I look at different talking about archetypes, I see. So I'm also just fascinated with tarot and the High Priestess.
The High Priestess is Mary Magdalene.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, that answers the question, right?
Yeah.
Or she could be Morgana, or
Actually,
Morgan.
if you'll notice, she's sitting between the pillars of the Temple of Solomon.
Oh, okay.
That's how it gives it away. Jachin and Boaz are the pillars of the Temple of Solomon.
Oh, I put it all together now. Okay. Yeah. Because so the High Priestess, and to me, the High Priestess is very similar to the Magician card, right?
And I'm going to tell you something that you might not have discovered, and it's a book written by Margaret Starbird, who shared that the reason that tarot was made was to tell the story of Jesus and Mary Magdalene in a way that nobody would know for sure. It was a hidden message. She's written a book on the tarot. I have it, and you really need to read that, because each of the figures she tells you how each of the major arcanas fit into the story of Jesus and Mary Magdalene.
Oh,
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
And the thing is whenever you have a tool that taps into truth, because I've heard other stories about tarot as well, and it's almost like yes to all of it. You know what I mean?
It's just something out here that turns on in here, inside.
Right.
It's not really the tarot.
Yeah.
It's what they are saying to your subconscious mind. It's not really the numbers. It's what they say to my subconscious mind.
Right.
And your subconscious mind is the key to your intuition.
So where is so you have this, we're talking about the astral plane, and then we're talking about more the higher, the divinity, the divine realm. And then we're talking about this earth plane where we're sitting here right now looking at the river. How does one go about... Well, there's a lot of people, I just recently reconnected with my old high school sweetheart, right? And he's an atheist, right? And purely so, just almost angry. He's like an angry atheist, right? And he's just, very...
Well, he probably
concrete.
hates what religion has done to the world.
Yeah, and exactly. And that makes sense.
Yes,
And so
it does.
we started talking because I was fascinated, and he, obviously this is a male energy that just it was my first, right? So there's this kind of fascination. But there was a block where, and I think it could just be physiology for some people, but he would not, we stopped talking. We, chatted, texted back and forth for maybe a week or two, but then he stopped. And because he wouldn't, there was no bridge between the, I'm calling it astral, whatever, between these other realms. He just would stop. I guess there's just people like that. I mean, there's a lot of people like that.
As many people as there are on the planet, we all come to the reality differently.
Yeah.
The astral, when you talk about the astral, that's a place that we can visit while we're in our body, through astral projection.
Right.
And there's a lot of work on that.
Right.
It is where, according to the people who are into spiritualism, and they're talking about communicating with your loved ones on the other side, they talk about the astral being the first place that you go.
Right.
It's where you're closest to be able to communicate.
Oh, okay.
But so I think, when I think of astral, and I only know what I've studied, I do not know for sure anything.
Right.
But that I think of the astral as close to the earth, in this. So it's more about this life, this time.
Right.
But I believe that we are a soul that is so much bigger than that.
So much bigger than that, and that's just kind of like a thin layer, and there's so much more. So how do we bridge? Tell me your story about, so your background is in psychotherapy, is that correct?
My background's in psychology.
Okay.
But I was, my spiritual path is, I came up in the Christian church.
Right.
And had a very intimate relationship with Jesus.
Right.
But then all the things didn't come together for me.
Right.
And I began to understand Jesus as a big brother. Someone who kind of knew how to live on this planet, whose message was to all of us, we don't die.
Yeah.
That was his whole message. It's like, I know that you were raised Jewish, so you probably aren't as familiar with the New Testament. But the story is that Mary Magdalene came to the tomb after he had been crucified. He came out to see her. And he said, go tell the disciples that I'm alive. The message is that all of us live past the death of the physical body.
Right.
But then, because or men, and it's probably mostly because men made the rules, are so literal. Then you have to say, well, then it must be God if he lived, and
right.
You make it into your own.
It becomes it leaves the abstract and it becomes more
right.
concrete.
And men are more literal.
Yeah.
They're right-brained.
Yeah.
They're left-brained. They're left-brained.
Yeah.
And they, they're about numbers, and if you can't see it with these eyes and touch it with these hands, then it doesn't really exist.
Right.
And since they've been the ones that are running the planet for a long time, that's the way why religion was created.
Right.
We created God in our image. Our religion.
Yeah.
But then if you go back to the Buddhism and Hinduism, you find a much more mystical experience of God.
Right. And do you so I have over my bed, I have a print of Shakti and Shiva, and it's half Shiva, half Shakti. And we were talking earlier about this concept that we are both, that's Jung, that's pure Jungian, right? I think you were the first one who introduced me to all that. What is it called? The anima?
And the animus.
And the animus. So it's all within us. So when we talk about the male energy, kind of taking over the Bible, taking over religion, is it truly the guys with the penises, or actual physical?
Well, I think it's traditionally been the guys with the penises, but it's the the energy,
right?
Because certainly you've got women who have more animus.
Yeah,
they're bossy and they want to be in charge, and more like a man is typically thought. So it's the idea is to try and find a balance.
Yeah.
And that's the gift of
right.
And when Carl Jung talks about the anima and animus, he's coming from strictly a psychological definition,
right.
which could be understood by the mind of a left brain man.
Right.
If it's psychology, then it can become like a science. Right. But
so do you isolate it to men and women? Do you would you say? I guess the whole topic topic of transgender. I would love to hear your impression, because you're how old are you? Will you
I'm
share?
69.
So you're 69. So I'm noticing a different reaction. What's your reaction to that?
That we're coming more into our androgyny.
Yeah.
Which is what Shirley MacLaine said that's where we came from.
Yeah.
She was an early teacher for me. As weird as people thought she was, she really did take a lot of people into a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
And she talked about coming from androgyny, and I think that we all are androgynous.
Yeah.
And so, it's not a problem for me.
Right.
It's not a problem for me personally.
Yeah. So it's a fascinating thing, because we are born into these bodies, but what is that?
And how many lifetimes have we been male, and how many lifetimes do you have female, or even if that's the way it works?
Yeah.
Because the other belief about reincarnation is if there is no such thing as time.
Yeah.
You have to think of this Becky, the soul of Becky, who is, of course, A Miracle said, there's only one of us here.
Yeah.
So is like the old-fashioned records that all your lifetimes are on there, past, present, and future. It's infinite. But the one you're experiencing now is the one that you've lifted and put the needle down on, and that's the one you're experiencing now. But you can change that by using your subconscious, your imagination, your intuition. You can visit all the others.
Right.
And that there is a soul that is evolving, whatever that means. And there's so many theories about ultimately, do we just become part of the all? But if it's, do we start it over again? Is it if there's no such thing as time? Is it okay? We become a part of it all, and then we start the whole cycle again. Right. That's just the way it is.
Yeah,
could be.
Okay, so tell the listeners a little bit about Pancho.
Oh well, he was my husband. We were married for 34 years, and I was very spiritual, but he was, just a guy, and so he would pay attention to me, but he wasn't quite so sure. When I began to have the experiences with 444 and Mary Magdalene, he was, he had to hear about it all the time. But ultimately, he got cancer when he was 50, and it changed his desire to know more about what life and death is.
Yeah.
So he lived for another 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, I was working for hospice. And I was a bereavement counselor. So I was hearing all these amazing after-death communication stories from my clients.
Yeah.
And I would come home and tell him. And then we had loved ones that began to die. And they would bring us, like his mother is the pileated woodpecker. His father is like the eagle that comes and lands on the lawn. And so when we knew he was dying with cancer, he agreed to let me know he was okay, and that we would write a book together about it. And that's what my parallel universe is. A love story transcending death is a story of his illness, death, but mostly the signs that he brought me afterwards, and my experience with living the grief that followed it, which was long and hard. In fact, I met you and I was just starting to come out of my grief. I hadn't been really out in the world at all, and I went to a writer's group, and that's where we met.
So, okay, let's talk about the mundane for a moment. So you sitting with you talking about this stuff, and I think when I first met you, I was still very much in the mundane world. I was curious, and I was writing books about ghosts and talking to ghosts, but I saw it as fiction. And now I look back, I'm like, oh no, how did I know all this stuff? You know what I mean? So but for you, this is very comfortable being in this space and talking about it now is really cool. Let's talk about the people who are kind of in the in-between. Maybe they're curious about it. Let's go back to when you first, so you were a good Christian and you love Jesus, and I'm guessing you still do. I'm guessing
of course,
yeah.
But it's different. You know, it's like I went through a period of traditional Christianity, then I went into a period of studying psychology and thinking I was an atheist because I couldn't believe in a God that looked like Santa Claus. that lived in a place called heaven and was watching us for everything we did.
Right.
So I spent 10 years of kind of being what I thought was an atheist.
Right.
But it wasn't. I was an agnostic.
Yeah.
And I recognized, like the Gnostics had the knowing.
Yeah.
Of course, when we arrive upon beliefs that fit for us, then we believe we know.
Right.
But the truth is, my knowing, I have no idea if it'll match. It matches with a lot of people's, but it's so vast, you know.
Right, exactly. And you've done a lot of traveling too, so you've met people. You've been all over. You've been to India, and you've been to So you've seen. Do you see that? I mean, tell me about the cross-cultural. You know, looking more the Joseph Campbell type of thing, where do you see it, that thread? So maybe they're not calling it Mary Magdalene, but you're seeing it everywhere.
I guess, you kind of draw people to you that you're like.
Yeah.
But, like, I have new friends that are fundamentalist Christians, and I can talk the language. I don't consider myself a fundamentalist Christian. I call myself a New Age, born-again, eclectic Christian. Because I can embrace all that was, but I've expanded on it. Yeah. It's just become larger for me, and I can totally embrace anybody else's name for relationship with God.
Right.
It's God as you understand God.
Right.
And it's not a man.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So I know that.
Yeah. And so how do we know this? How do we know that when you're sitting with a fundamentalist Christian, when you're sitting with a Jew, when you're sitting with a, with a Hindu, like, how do we know we're talking about the same thing? I mean, our language, our experiences, we're coming from these vastly different cultures. How do we know we're talking about the same thing?
Because the common denominator is love.
Yeah.
When it really is genuine.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think Christianity got off track. It's been responsible for more deaths than any other religion on the planet.
Yeah.
And a lot of deaths. And that's because of our ego that wants our God to be the God.
Right.
And so it's the ego is the mundane that wants our truth to be truth, our God to be the truth, the God, and yours isn't. And it's really it's an ego thing. Yeah. And that is the mundane. Yeah. That is the lower chakras. Yeah. The higher chakras is when it's talking from your heart and from your mind and connecting to all that is.
Right. And what I find is when I'm with people, of whatever faith it is, you like, it's a space. It's almost like my brother and I call it like the vessel, where it's like you can feel it open, and it's not about the words. It's not about the words anymore. When you start getting those higher chakras, it's about
energy.
Is energy, and the word love is. That's it. It's everywhere. Yeah. And you can be alone in nature and know that love and just see it.
And you could instantly change from love to hate and hate to love. Anybody who's been married knows that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same emotion. It's a Likert scale that goes from one end to the other, but it's the same emotion, and we're on that somewhere at all times.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice if we could supremely end up in the love end all the time. But we're human beings. Yeah. We have egos, and so we're being drawn up and down that while we have a body, and I don't know what happens afterwards for sure.
Yeah. So what's hate? What is that? I mean,
fear.
Yeah. And there's a dolphin. Okay. Do you believe in evil?
If ego is evil. Yeah. For me, that's what the devil is.
Yeah.
It's ego.
Yeah. Okay. So, and is that? And I want to make sure, because so that ego stuff, is that like where Christianity kind of went sour? But not just Christianity, like all religions, all institutions.
Because we all go.
And we all of us.
It's the part that trips us up. But I understand it in a different way than I did when I was studying psychology, because I understand the word ego in terms of how it's expressed in a book called A Course in Miracles.
Okay.
And what it's taught me was that ego is our friend, because our ego is what keeps our body alive.
Right.
It makes sure we don't, it's being careful to make sure there's not an enemy over there, make sure that we eat. It's always vigilant to keep this body alive because the ego believes that all we are is this body.
Right, right.
But when you embrace the reality that we're so much more than this body, then you can tame the ego down and say, don't worry about it. You know, you got a long time. We're okay. We're safe.
Right.
You can't feel love when you're feeling fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you have to tame your ego.
Yeah.
And I always taught my students when I worked in the high school that, you know, it's like a little gremlin on your shoulder, and it's constantly chattering all the scary things that are going to happen. Right. And you just say, shh, be quiet, calm down, we're okay, we're okay. So it's that voice in our head that is fearful.
And how does the ego develop?
I guess from birth, you know, I think it's just survival. It's actually to keep the body alive.
Right.
Without keeping the body alive, we wouldn't have the opportunity to have the spiritual journey that we have.
Right.
So the body is just the vessel that gives us the opportunity to have the spiritual experience. And some people never have it.
Right.
But it is a kind of, you know, you start when you're a tiny baby, it's totally selfish. Feed me, feed me, feed me. Cry, cry, cry. Wet, I'm wet, you know. So, but that's how you stay alive.
Yeah.
And then you learn to smile.
Right.
And the baby smiles, and it lights everybody's heart, and that's how you get attention and love and all of that too. So, you know, it's a biological thing.
So it's almost like ego is the search for almost more of a physical love. It's the reassurance of that people love you and people are going to give you what you need.
It's the search for safety.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the part that wants safety. Just saw a manatee tail.
Oh.
Yeah, we have dolphin, manatee, fox. I'm sure we'll see a deer in just a minute.
The deer and the foxes make me so happy. They make me so happy. And I just found out that, so I'm on this kind of bikini kick right now, and their animal is the fox.
Oh, cool.
And I've been watching the foxes every single morning.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're being led by your own journey.
Yeah.
You know, you're being given what you need to follow and understand.
Right.
And that's a spiritual journey that we each have an opportunity to go on.
And isn't it interesting? So we're sitting on our docks right next to each other, you know, and your experience, like you said, fox is family for you. And, you know, and we see dolphin, it means, you know, and it's interesting that to each of us, the same, like we're looking at the same foxes in the morning, you know, but it's like to each of us, the message that the cosmos is so intricate and so perfect.
We interpret it.
Yeah.
I go to the animal wisdom. I just go to Native American wisdom and ask. You can Google it. Everyone. Okay. Meaning for a fox. Native American wisdom. Right. And that's how I've just come up with the definition, because it's all about, you know, words and the meaning we give to words. Yeah, exactly. And when you study several languages, you know that that's pretty broad. Yeah, exactly. And symbols are, if you look at like crystals, like, you know, you were like, oh, I think I want some amethyst, and you pick up, you know, and it's very kind of blah. It's like, you know, oh, this will, you know, it's your psychic abilities, or, you know, it's like, but my personal take on it is, I'm not big into crystals. I have some beautiful stones that I love, but I will also go out here and walk the trails, and I will find a stone, and it will sing to me, and I didn't have to spend any money on it. That's what I bring home from every trip. Yeah. I've got rocks from every country I've been to, and I've always wished I'd written it down, but now I just have a bunch of rocks. Yeah. No, it's still at Sean's house. I have a box, because I would do the same thing, and I don't know how I did it. I would write on the rock itself, so it's a beautiful little collection. But yeah, I have so many, you know, I find feathers all the time, and it's just this communication. And Shannon, I think this is why I was drawn to talking to you today, is because they, and I say they, I don't know what they is, but they're speaking to me so much lately, and it's so amazing. Yeah. And I have a book right now that I keep by my bed by Shakti Gawain that's Living in the Light, and the subtitle is about, I can't remember it, but it's about finding your inner truth, following your intuition. That's what it's so, and stepping into this new world. So it's like these things just keep coming to me and calling to me faster and faster and faster. It's called the spiritual emergence. Yeah. When you get started, you keep spiraling up. Yeah. And you're full of energy and elation. And,
And does it keep going, or like what happens as you get older? And
Well, I certainly try to tamp it down because people don't really like the energy so much.
That's what
So I try
about.
and tamp it down, and I've been trying to find a balance and really come from my heart much
Right.
more than my ego feeling all of this.
Oh yeah, it's a power thing.
Well, it is.
Yeah,
It can
yeah.
be totally a power thing because you think, wow, I must be special because this stuff is happening to me.
Right.
But it's the way it is.
yeah.
So
yeah.
you have to go there, and then you have to come back, and if we can end up here
Right, you're
in
kind
your
of
heart.
modulating.
Yeah, the balance.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
the balance.
Yeah, and I feel like I feel very young with all of this. I feel, and what you're saying is exactly right, because when you break through another level, and suddenly you get this rush of energy that you can feel the Shakti like pushing through you, and you're like, then you start looking around and you're like, oh, okay, this is just a me thing, like I need to just modulate a little bit, because we still are in these bodies, and we have all these people around us who are just doing their thing, and nobody's better than anybody else. In fact, it's a little kooky when you
Yeah, it can be kooky. It's not
Yeah.
as kooky as it used to be.
yeah
And that's why I love when the Course of Miracles says there's only one of us here.
yeah. So tell me about being a psychologist. Like, where is the line of mental illness and spiritual awakening?
Well, Carl Jung went totally into mental illness to write his Red Book. Mm-hmm. And his family did not want that known. Mm-hmm. So he had this book that he wrote, and it was kept into a vault until just a few years ago when they released it. But it's his journey into insanity to find spirit.
Oh, wow.
So it's really very much the same, but when you get to the ego and that all whipping around, sometimes you can get too far out.
Yeah.
And I'm
yeah.
just reaching above my head.
Yeah.
And we have to pull ourselves back in. But
Right.
But I'm sure that people who are diagnosed with mental illness
Right.
are having spiritual experiences, and
Yeah. And so my take, and we haven't talked in a long time, but so I was having some kidney issues, and I was on lithium. I had been diagnosed with bipolar, I was 14. I think they just pulled a diagnosis out of the hat, because I started researching it many, many, many years later and thinking, I've never had any of these symptoms. I have like these very kind of divine connection feelings, but I've never been manic in the way that they're talking about. And so because it was quite a blessing that I was having these kidney issues, and so the psychiatrist said, yep, I need you to go off the lithium. And I'm like, he's a new psychiatrist. I'm like, you're just going to, what's going to happen? He's like, well, we're just going to wait and see, and, we'll put you on something else or whatever. I went off the lithium. Nothing happened. I was on lithium for 35 years. I went through 3 pregnancies with lithium. No change at all. No change at all. Like, so what I'm realizing, and I have my dear friend who's a transpersonal therapist. He's my therapist, but we've become friends. He was the one who said to me, maybe in our 3rd session, he said, you're not bipolar. And I mean, this is, and I'm like, that's super irresponsible, Joe. Why would you say that? And he's like, I just don't think you are. He's like, I just don't. And so that's been my journey.
yes, that was certainly something that I was always thinking about as I was learning the diagnosis. I like to say, it's not about diagnosing people. It's about each of us have a personality.
Right.
And each of us can spiral down under stress into a diagnosable disorder.
Yeah.
Because my personality on the Enneagram is a 7,
Uh-huh.
under stress, I look bipolar.
Yeah.
So under stress,
Right.
I can get manic and concerned and anxious.
Yeah.
So all of us have it. Each personality has a mental health disorder that you could go to and find, because we don't operate well under stress.
Right.
So it's
right.
it's learning to live a balanced life. The only issue, of course, is if you ever feel suicidal,
Yeah.
then you know that it's
Or I mean, it's
or homicidal.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just being off balance. It's when like you said, when you're under stress, when the ego takes charge, and there's no soul, or it could be the other way. I think with psychosis, is you go too far up or too far out, and you're not.
And it's biochemical, and
Yeah.
just like the chakras are also biochemical,
Yeah.
each of the chakras is associated with a gland in our body.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so it's really a chemical system that we are working with.
Right.
And when you are going through this, you're stimulating the glands as you go up, and your body's producing a medicine,
Right,
so to speak, because our
Yeah.
body produces every medicine that we could ever use.
Interesting. So if that's true, why do people get sick and die?
Get sick and die because that's the journey of, I don't know, I kind of think that we may be inventions of some other planet, and we're like that took over. Like
What do you mean? Like, explain that more.
I'm artificial intelligence.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, but this is just me thinking,
Yeah,
and that's what I do all the time, and that, hey, we could be, artificial intelligence.
Right,
that
right.
Learn to become independent and took over the world.
Yeah. Right.
And
There's
that's-
so many different, systems. We could be avatars. You listen to people like Elon Musk, and they're
Well,
like,
I
we're
know.
just,
He makes
Yeah.
sense
yeah.
sometimes.
Well, right. I mean, like they say, simulation. We could be in a simulation. And
We could.
My daughter hates when we mention that, but it's true, and you just don't know. And that's the fun of it. To me, that's the fun of life, is that you have all of these. It could be anything, you know.
And it's like Caltech physicists that are saying this.
Yeah, exactly.
So I give it
exactly.
a little bit of credibility.
Yeah, well, credibility in the physical world.
Right.
It's just it's interesting how we're trying to legitimize stuff. You know what I mean? It's like suddenly now there's like neuroscientists and physicists are telling us stuff, and we're like, oh, see, it was true. But it's like,
That science and religion do cross.
they do cross.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I've always straddled the line
Yeah.
between science and spirituality.
Yeah.
And we're all that.
Yeah. Well, and then I think psychology is kind of a bridge. It's a bridge between the two.
Well, the thing is, we need to learn how to manage living in this world with bodies.
Yeah.
And that's what I call the Course in Miracles. I keep referring to it's a manual on how to live in a body while you're on this planet.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to be happy, peaceful. We want to be a Buddhist.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
We want to go down.
Yeah.
Have all those things, and we each
Yeah.
have to learn that.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about, this is going to be my last big area of discussion. What we were talking about, I think, before I started recording, is this idea of manifesting. Well, what's Esther Hicks? Is that right? So there's this whole camp. So I come from the more Bhakti and Buddhism. Ram Dass was my guy. And Ram Dass kind of, but there's this kind of the isness. It's that so and it's those moments where you're sitting on the dock and you're just and there's that. But then I see and I think it's more the New Age movement. It is Shakti Gawain, her book and all of that stuff. There's this kind of this let's make change. And so are they separate? Are they in opposition to each other? These two perspectives of the one is of the actor. I am going to make change, and it it gets into more the magic, and I'm going to manifest versus the I sit on the dock. So how do those interact with each other?
I think we start out on our lower chakras, which is the material thing. It's
Right.
sex and money.
Right.
So we think that what we're after is things.
Right.
And things are really nice.
Yeah,
And I learned early on how to manifest the things that I
Right.
needed, whether it's a house, a car, a job, or that stuff.
Right.
Although I struggled the whole time and had all kinds of doubts.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the journey, and that's the lower chakras.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, you realize that it's not about the things. It's certainly not about the things that are going to make you happy.
Right.
And so you start wondering about the higher chakras,
Right.
about love and intuition and connection to more than this body.
So it's bringing those in together.
Yeah.
And so like you look at a chakra, it's like there is a linear thing. It's not a circle. Maybe it is, and I don't understand.
Well, there's a spiral of energy that moves up. Although the energy spirals up.
So are those physical things? Will we consider that stuff bad, and then the higher stuff is good?
Oh, heavens no.
Okay.
There is no good or bad. There just is.
Right. Yeah.
We learn through everything. You know, it's like when we go through hard things, it's exercising our emotional muscle to get stronger.
Right.
To live in this world. Because that's the game, you know. Can you live peacefully in this world and survive? Can you eat first and shelter yourself? And then can you have relationships?
Yeah.
And then can you find peace or connection that's greater? That's the journey of, that's our job as human beings.
So would you say that something like Tantra is and not just, just in the sexual sense, but Tantra as a practice is an integration? It's pulling up the lower chakras and integrating it with the higher chakras? Is that what Tantra is?
Well, some people use Tantra to raise their Kundalini energy.
Right.
Some people do yoga to raise their Kundalini energy.
Right.
Some people it's spontaneous, you know.
Yeah.
Some people it just creeps up on. So
some people are like, what the hell is going on?
Certainly there is a large group of people that study Tantra, but that it seems to me that kind of maybe gets us too tied to the physical. Body. But it's just
Yeah. Well, and it's just, I mean, and there's so many ways to do it, and it really depends on the individual. Like, someone can say, oh, I do bhakti, and so, okay, well, that it means different things the way each of us embodies that, whatever the practice is, whether it's Tantra or Satanism or whatever it is, it's that how you embody it, and it goes back to that core principle of love, is where is that in the whole equation? You can have lots and lots of money and
not be happy.
Well, and not be happy, or be in a place of pure love.
You could.
And just share it and just, you know.
That's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Shannon. This
You're
is
welcome.
Really cool. I'm so glad we did this.
Yeah. Thanks, Becky.